Google self-storage profit margin right now, and you'll find a number that gets repeated so often. It's practically gospel in this industry. 41%. 41% profit margin. Compare that to a restaurant, which is lucky to clear 5%. And you can see why every real estate investor with a spreadsheet has suddenly decided they want to own a storage facility. But here's the thing, nobody selling you a storage franchise wants to mention. There is another number floating around, from a completely different set of industry data, and it says the average self-storage business actually nets 2%. 2, not 41. Same industry, same year, two numbers that are 20 times apart from each other. So, which one is real? Is this the closest thing to a money-printing machine in real estate? Or is it a slow, dead, heavy grind that only looks good on the surface? Today we're going to find out exactly where that gap comes from, what it actually costs to get into this business, where the real money hides, and the one mistake that turns a 41% margin dream into a barely surviving reality. Because both of those futures exist in this exact same industry, and which one you get depends entirely on decisions most new owners don't even realize they're making. Here's the scale we're talking about. There are over 52,000 self-storage facilities in the United States right now, and just to put that in perspective, that's roughly as many locations as every Starbucks, McDonald's, Dunkin', Pizza Hut, and Wendy's combined. All of them, added together. That's how saturated this boring little industry has quietly become. Total rentable space across the country sits north of 2.1 billion square feet. And the industry as a whole pulled in close to $40 billion in annual revenue in recent years. Here's what makes this business genuinely unusual, though. Unlike hotels or gyms, self-storage doesn't really have a seasonal collapse. People don't stop moving, downsizing, divorcing, or running businesses out of their garage just because it's January. National occupancy has hovered in the low to mid-90s for years, dipping only slightly to around 91.6% in the most recent data, which by real estate standards is an extraordinarily stable number. That stability is exactly why big institutional money has piled into this space. Construction spending on new storage facilities hit $7.4 billion in a recent year alone, up nearly 30% from the year before. When Wall Street starts chasing an asset class this hard, it's usually because the underlying math genuinely works, at least for the players who understand where the profit actually lives. Let's talk real numbers, because this is where the daydream usually meets the bank statement. The average total cost to start a self-storage business, meaning either building one from the ground up or buying an existing facility, sits right around $2 million. On the low end, you're looking at $1.5 million. On the high end, closer to $2.4 million, depending heavily on land cost size and whether you're adding climate-controlled units. For that money, you're typically getting a facility somewhere around 50,000 square feet. Basic drive-up units are the cheapest to build. Climate-controlled units and multi-story buildings cost significantly more per square foot, but they also command a real premium in rent, and increasingly, that premium is what separates the facilities that thrive from the ones fighting over price-sensitive customers. Financing-wise, this is one of the few small business categories where an SBA loan actually fits beautifully, because the real estate itself functions as collateral. SBA 7A loans can stretch out to 25 years, which matters enormously in a business where the property is genuinely the asset, not just where the business happens to sit. Here's the quiet advantage almost nobody talks about compared to restaurants, gyms, or car washes. Once that building is up, your ongoing costs are remarkably low. No perishable inventory, no kitchen staff, no treadmills breaking down at 2 inches the morning, just steel, concrete, and a gate code. This is where we need to slow down, because the revenue side of this business is deceptively simple on the surface and genuinely clever underneath. The baseline rent per square foot, the national average rental rate lands somewhere around $9 to $12 per square foot. Annually, though, this swings hard based on location and unit type. A 10 by 10 unit, the single most popular size in the entire industry, according to IBISWorld, might rent for somewhere between $80 and $150 a month, depending on your market and whether it's climate controlled. Do some quick napkin math on a mid-sized facility. 200 units, average rent of $100 a month, running at 85% occupancy. That's roughly $17,000 a month, or about $204,000 a year, just from base rent. The multiplier nobody talks about, rate increases on existing tenants. Here's the part of this business that genuinely separates it from almost every other real estate category. Storage tenants are famously, almost comically, slow to move out once their stuff is in there. Moving a couch and 40 boxes out of a unit is a hassle most people keep putting off month after month, year after year. That inertia lets well-run operators raise existing tenant rates steadily over time, often well above what new customers are quoted to walk in the door. This single dynamic quietly raising rent on tenants, who almost never leave, is one of the biggest drivers behind why institutional buyers pay such high prices for stabilized storage facilities. The add-ons, insurance, truck rentals, and retail. Nearly every facility now pushes tenant insurance or a protection plan at sign-up, typically $10 to $25 a month per unit. And this is close to pure profit, because the operator is essentially reselling a policy with minimal overhead. Add truck rental partnerships, moving boxes, locks, and packing supplies sold at the front counter, and you've got a second small retail business, layered on top of a real estate business. The premium play, climate control and specialty storage. Climate-controlled units, RV and boat storage, and wine or document storage, all command meaningfully higher rents than a basic drive-up unit. And this is exactly why new construction has leaned so heavily toward these premium categories in recent years. Same land, same footprint, dramatically better revenue per second square foot. Stack all of that together: rent, rate increases on existing tenants, insurance, retail, and premium unit types, and you start to understand where that 41% margin number comes from. It's not a fantasy. It's what happens when a facility is running well, mostly full, and squeezing every one of these 5 sources at once. So here's the honest question. If the margins can genuinely hit 41%, where does that 2% number come from? The answer is debt service, and it's the single most important thing in this entire video. Remember that $2 million startup cost from Section 2. Almost nobody pays that in cash. Most owners finance the bulk of it, and that mortgage payment sits on top of every other operating expense, quietly eating whatever's left after the building itself turns a healthy operating profit. Here's the distinction that trips up almost every first-time storage investor. There is a difference between net operating income, or NOI, which measures profitability of the property itself, before financing, and actual net profit, which is what's left in your pocket after the bank gets paid. A facility can have a genuinely excellent 41% NOI margin on paper, and still leave the owner with almost nothing once a large mortgage payment comes out of that number every single month. Beyond financing, here's what the operating side actually costs: property taxes and insurance. Storage facilities sit on real estate, and real estate gets taxed like real estate. This is often one of the largest line items after debt service, and it climbs steadily as the property appreciates in value. Staffing. The beautiful part of this business is you genuinely don't need much. Many facilities run on a single part-time manager, or increasingly no on-site staff at all, fully automated with app-based access and remote monitoring. This is a huge structural advantage over gyms or car washes, where labor eats a third of revenue. Marketing and vacancy management. Keeping units full requires constant, unglamorous digital marketing, because when your competitor down the road drops their rate on a 10x10 unit, you feel it within weeks. Maintenance. Gates, security cameras, lighting, and the occasional roof or paving repair. Low compared to almost any other commercial property type, but not zero, and definitely not something to budget at zero. Reported costs across the industry, when you strip out financing, typically run somewhere between 36 and 60% of revenue, depending heavily on facility size and location, which lines up almost exactly with that 30 to 40% margin range you'll see in more careful industry breakdowns. So here's the real answer to the hook from the very start of this video. The 41% number is real, but it's measuring the property's operating performance. The 2% number is also real, but it's measuring what happens after a heavily leveraged owner services their debt. Neither number is lying to you. They're just answering 2 completely different questions, and almost nobody selling you on this business bothers to tell you which one they're quoting. Oversupply is real, and it's local, because storage facilities are relatively cheap and fast to build, compared to hotels or hospitals. Popular growth markets can get overbuilt fast. When 3 new facilities open within 2 miles of yours in the same year, your pricing power evaporates almost overnight, no matter how good your operations are. Occupancy can mask a pricing problem. A facility sitting at 90% occupancy sounds healthy until you realize half those tenants are locked into promotional rates from move-in specials that never got raised. High occupancy and high revenue are not automatically the same thing, and this is exactly the trap that catches operators who don't actively manage their existing tenant rates. The debt is the whole game. We just spent an entire section on this, but it bears repeating on its own. A facility purchased or built with too much leverage, at too aggressive an interest rate, can look profitable on every metric except the one that actually matters: what's left after the mortgage clears every month. Climate and disaster exposure is genuinely underestimated. Flooding, wildfire zones, and severe weather can damage a building full of other people's belongings, and that's a liability and insurance conversation that gets far more complicated than most new owners expect going in. Non-payment and lien law varies wildly by state. When a tenant stops paying, the legal process to auction off their unit and recover that space is governed by state-specific lien laws, and getting this wrong moving too fast. And competition from peer-to-peer storage platforms is a genuinely new threat. Services that let homeowners rent out their garage or spare space directly to renters are undercutting traditional facilities on price in some markets, particularly for short-term or casual storage needs. The pattern here should sound familiar by now if you've watched other videos in this series. Nobody builds serious wealth off one storage facility. The real institutional money, the public storages and extra spaces of the world, wins through portfolio scale. Buy or build dozens of facilities across multiple markets. Spread the vacancy risk so one oversupplied submarket doesn't sink the whole operation, and use that scale to negotiate better financing terms than any single independent owner ever could. They also invest heavily in dynamic pricing software that adjusts rates in near real time, based on occupancy and local competition. The exact rate increase strategy we talked about earlier, just automated and optimized at a level an individual owner rarely matches on their own. So is owning a self-storage facility actually the truth behind that 41% number, or is it the truth behind that 2% number? Honestly, it's both, and which one becomes your reality depends almost entirely on how much debt you take on to get in, and how disciplined you are about raising rates on the tenants who never leave. This is a business with genuinely excellent underlying economics: low staffing, low seasonality, low physical wear and tear compared to almost anything else on this channel. But it's also a heavily financed real estate play first, and a business second, and if you go in thinking about it only as the second thing, that mortgage payment is going to teach you the difference the hard way. The owners who do well here aren't the ones who found a secret. They're the ones who understood, from day one, exactly which of those two numbers they were actually building toward. If this breakdown gave you the real picture behind a number you've probably seen thrown around online, subscribe, because next time, we're taking apart the economics of a completely different business, and I promise you, there is a similar gap hiding in that one too. Bureau construction.